Welcome to the metaverse. When Guo Kang came to this world, he gradually realized that history seemed to be somewhat wrong. In the homeland of Eastern Rome, a country called the Roman Khanate emerged. His adoptive father, Guo Daxia, as one of the most important feudal lords of the Khanate, was on a campaign to conquer the east and west for it. Throughout the world, various bizarre Yuan regimes have brought vitality and all things are competing. However, behind them, beyond the mist in the distance, a seemingly strong and outrageous Ming dynasty was staring at everyone. Rumors have been circulating among martial artists that Rome's fate will come to an end in decades. Who will destroy it? Can Guo Kang save its fate? Works that are mainly humorous, if there are any similarities, they are purely coincidental, keywords of the novel. Since the establishment of the account. The Chronicles of the Roman Khanate without a pop-up window, since the establishment of the account. The complete collection of the Chronicles of the Roman Khanate TXT download, since the establishment of the account. The latest chapter of the Chronicles of the Roman Khanate read. Chapter 1. Sophia Goddess Temple. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Sophia Goddess Temple. On a winter afternoon, warm sunlight spreads across the earth. Guo Kang leaned against the big tree in the small garden, feeling increasingly lazy and unwilling to move. The bell rang, seemingly the landmark of Constantinople, the Hagia Sophia, and service began again. The residence of the Guo family is located in the 4th district near the Palace of Constantinople, and is also a gathering place for powerful families. From the garden, you can see the Cathedral of Santa Sophia. Commonly known as the goddess's temple among adoptive fathers and other people. Her magnificent main building, along with the surrounding 4 huge Sulu ingots, is very prominent even here. Guo Kang has always been skeptical about who designed this layout. But now, he is also not in the mood to think. The soreness in his limbs made him just want to continue lying down and not do anything. He has been in this world for several years, but he still can't withstand the devil's training of his adoptive father. Last night, he had a strange dream, where a towering fire cage enveloped an unknown city, exuding an aura reminiscent of the end of the world spoken of by Greek priests. He wandered aimlessly in the city, but didn't know what to do. After waking up, I feel depressed and unhappy in my heart. After finishing breakfast, Guo Kang still hadn't recovered and decided to go out to relax. As soon as he left, he saw his adoptive father practicing martial arts. He bared his arms, completely disregarding the cold of deep winter, playing with an iron rod with a loud roar, and a layer of white mist rose from his muscular body. Guo Kang greeted him, and he put down his iron rod and walked over to ask kindly. Guo Kang said that he was just not feeling well. My adoptive father nodded earnestly upon hearing this. Then, he picked up 2 stone locks and handed them to Guo Kang. Kanger, don't think too much. As long as you exercise for a while, your troubles will disappear, said the adoptive father with a cheerful smile. As a result, Guo Kang was pulled by him to practice for half an hour and still doesn't want to move. While lost in thought, a head suddenly popped out of the wall and glanced left and right. As soon as Guo Kang saw him, he knew he wouldn't want to rest today. Before he could stand up, a handsome young man skillfully climbed over the wall and jumped into the garden. He was still holding a long pole in his hand, strode forward and loudly called out to him, "Don't lie down, get up. Master Wang has something to ask you for." "You have something to do with me, can't you go through the main entrance?" Guo Kang said angrily, "My adoptive mother told me last time that Li Xianying would come over the wall again and throw him out. The main entrance is too winding." Li Xianying waved her hand and said, "Why is your door facing east? Every time I walk on the street, I have to take a detour. The next time I see my teacher, I'll apologize to her. If we get caught next time," he thought for a moment and added. Guo Kang was quite annoyed by this kind of guy who casually flipped into people's homes. However, the other party said, "I'll wait for you outside," and then turned around and left on their own. The wall of the Guo family was not actually low, but Li Xianying grabbed the long pole in his hand and ran a few steps. He tied the pole towards the corner of the wall and jumped over it in one go. He could also pull the pole over with ease. Guo Kang rolled his eyes. Looking left and right, I found no one around, so I ran to the corner as well. I lifted my breath and jumped onto the top of the wall through a stone crevice, flipping over as well. You've made great progress in your skills, kid. Li Xianying hugged the long pole and smiled, but it's better to use a spear with bare hands. Do you want to learn from me? Call me Big Brother, and I'll teach you some moves passed down from your ancestors. If your ancestors knew that the spear was used to climb over a wall, they would probably have killed you. Guo Kang said unhappily, what is Dalai Lama Yuan looking for me for? It's probably a matter of national documents again, Li Xianying said. You go to the Suanyang temple and ask him yourself, and you'll know. Wang Dalai Lama is a nickname, and the true title seems to be Wang Damu Shou. However, Guo Kang and others have become accustomed to using this joking nickname and have been unable to change it. There are far more people coming from the Central Plains to the Western regions in this world than the one Guo Kang came from. For example, Wang Dalai Lama was originally a wandering sorcerer. When he was young, he lived in the river and made a living by pretending to be divine and manipulating ghosts. However, the competition in this industry is too fierce and there is no future, so I decided to change places and reopen. He heard that the Roman Empire was now ruled by the Purple Horde Khanate, and after some thought, he thought that the most promising Khanate in this country should be the Lamaism. So, he memorized some scriptures, dressed up and claimed to be the great Lama from the East, ready to start a new life. Unexpectedly, by this time, the officials of the Purple Horde had already believed in Eastern Orthodoxy, and the Lamas were no longer popular. Wang Dalai Lama was at risk of losing his job again and could only start from scratch. However, while working as a helper for the church, he encountered the newly appointed Grand Patriarch, Yin Daochang, by the then emperor. Yin Daochang is also unfamiliar with his hometown and is quite distressed about the environment here. Seeing that Wang Dalai Lama is intelligent and clever, he accepted him as his disciple, which can be considered as an additional helper for himself. Fortunately, Wang Dalai Lama's basic skills are already solid, and his professional skills such as giving speeches and performing miracles are very excellent. With the guidance and support of Yin Daochang, he rose to prominence in the church. After Yin Daochang's death, he naturally took over as the head pastor. Of course, this is actually nothing. The Roman Empire has always had a tradition of emperors interfering with the church. In the past, it was common for emperors to appoint trusted eunuchs as the capital of the great patriarch. Wang Dalai Lama is at least a religious figure, and he is still a bit more serious than eunuchs. After leaving the Guo family's house, the two walked along the main road towards the Nyanyang temple. Thanks to the victories in previous wars, the city has remained relatively stable in recent years, with more and more people, especially the unscrupulous merchants from Venice. Venice and the Khanate have always maintained traditional friendship. When they marched westward and entered the Black Sea coast, they established contact with Venetian merchants. The merchants provided detailed intelligence to the Mongolian army, and in return, the Badu army would protect their commercial interests and drive out their competitors. Under the guidance of these Venetians, the Mongols were sometimes more familiar with the local geographical environment than the local princes themselves, providing great convenience for warfare. The Venetian merchants naturally made a big profit. As the Golden Horde was on the brink of collapse, a force under the Khanate gradually became stronger on the west coast of the Black Sea. Of course, at that time, they did not have that name. The leader Boyan Timur claimed to be a descendant of the Golden Horde Khanate, but with the help of his friends and ancestors of the Guo family, such as Guo Gai, he broke away from the Golden Horde and established a new Khanate. Although in Guo Kang's original world, it seemed that he had never heard of this force. Moreover, even in this world, Boyan Timur's identity and lineage are quite suspicious. But in a chaotic environment, no one has gone into these details. Since then, due to common interests, the Khanate has had close contact with Venetian merchants. Later, after years of effort, they successfully went south and took control of Constantinople. Because the Khanate believed that it was also a Roman regime and imitated the Romans, using purple as the most prestigious symbol of the Great Khan. Although the official title still follows the style of the Roman Empire, people generally refer to him as the Purple Horde. In order to restore their trade status in the area, Venetians are one of the strongest supporters of this action. For the Khanate, the power of Genoa here is too strong. To balance them, Venice is undoubtedly the best choice. Passing through these passing pedestrians, they quickly arrived at their destination. Yuan Dalai Lama has several office locations. In addition to serving as the abbot of the Sophia goddess temple, he also serves as a royal shaman and participates in various necessary diplomatic occasions and religious ceremonies. Usually, it's really difficult to find where he is. This time it's okay, there are priests waiting for them in front of the gate. Li Xianying said he still has something to do and asked Guo Kang to go by himself. Guo Kang could tell at a glance that something was wrong. If you have something to do, you won't come to me, he pointed out straightforwardly. If you just notify me, you can send a servant to do it. It's worth the young master of the Li family throwing away other things and personally visiting. Now you're in a hurry to leave. I think you just want to take the opportunity to escape and see the play, right? Li Xianying's blush and hesitated. Guo Kang is not unable to understand him, it's just that his excuse is a bit speechless. But his family is indeed very strict and there is no good way. Like the Guo family, the Li family was also a meritorious hereditary marquis of the Purple Horde Khanate, ranking high in the Zhou kingdom. Li Xianying's great-grandfather, Li Tiance, achieved 5 victories in 5 battles that year, completely defeated the Hungarian-Polish coalition and the support of the Holy Roman Empire, making it impossible to directly threaten the powerful forces in the hinterland of the Khanate in the northwest direction. This war is considered one of the 2 founding wars of the Purple Horde. After this war, the Purple Horde easily entered Constantinople by driving out the emperors John V and John VI, who were in a civil war in the city, with almost no resistance, through the internal struggles of the Paleolid dynasty. Li Tiance himself has also received tremendous honors from it. Constantinople was designated as the seat of the Khanate of the Purple Horde and renamed Dadu. And Li Tiance was appointed as the Jingzhou-yin, becoming the first Grand Marshal. In fact, the Khanate had already known about this city. Because this was the capital city established by the Roman Khan, it was once called Khan Bali. Khan is the Great Khan, Bali is the city. Together, it becomes the city of Great Sweat. The Uruz people under the Khan's court also know this name. They called the Great Khan Tsar and the city Ghoul, so Khan Bali in their mouth became Tsar Ghoul again. And the Vikings from the north ruled Uruz back then, and they still retain a deep cultural influence to this day. These Vikings, also known as the Russians, called Constantinople Micrograd. Micra means big, and Gard refers to this city. So, this name is simply Dashang, or Dadu. So it seems that Tsar Ghoul, Khan Bali, and Dadu are all one place. Everyone thought most of them sounded the best and remembered, so they used it instead of the originally too long name. However, after the war, Li Tiance became complacent, addicted to Greek drama, and didn't ask about anything important all day. Just 2 years later, while the main force of the Purple Tent was out fighting, the 2 emperors of John actually joined hands and, with the sponsorship of Shenluo and Poland, sent their confidants to sneak back to Constantinople, inciting the citizens to rebel. At a critical moment, Li Tiance, who was responsible for defending the city, was watching a play when suddenly he was surrounded by actors. Caught off guard, Li Tiance was seriously injured and with the desperate rescue of another pillar country and old minister Chao Meng, he hastily escaped from the city. However, his subordinates suffered heavy losses, and even Chao Meng died from injuries. The following year, Li Tiance also passed away due to injury and depression. Before his death, He gave his son Li Yinglin 3 arrows and demanded that he fulfill 3 last wishes. To return the expelled Constantinople, eliminate the archenemy of Poland-Hungary, and abolish the usurped pseudo-Holy Roman Empire. And these last wishes have not been fully fulfilled so far. Therefore, throughout the Li family, every day they hold national grudges and family grudges in their ears. Li Xianying grew up in this environment from a young age and was constantly urged by her family to learn military strategy and practice martial arts. His entertainment activities are much fewer than those of other noble children. Watching a play is a pain point for the family and is strictly prohibited. Guo Kang's idea is somewhat more free, thinking that as long as you don't delay the main task, playing is not impossible. He waved his hand at Li Xianying, indicating that he didn't care and wouldn't report to his family. Li Xianying, as if granted amnesty, grabbed the iconic pole and ran away in a flash. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. The Great Qin and the Great Roman Ulus. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. The Great Qin and the Great Roman Ulus. At the entrance of the Nyangnyang Temple, a priest is already waiting for Guo Kang. Quickly, he was taken to the office of the Grand Marshal. Inside, Wang Dalai Lama, wearing the crown of a shepherd's head and holding a brush, was directing a young man to tidy up his things. Fu Xing'ero, Heavenly Sovereign. Wang Dalai Lama greeted Guo Kang with a smile as he saw him enter. Guo Gongzi's face is full of red light. What good thing has happened? It's nothing, I just practiced a little more. Guo Kang ignored the overly Nestorian greeting and couldn't help but ask where Dalai Lama Wang learned it from. He just waved his hand and said, Master Wang is looking for me. Is there anything wrong? The emperor asked Tuohuan Taiji to be responsible for drafting the national documents, but I don't think he's very good at it. You know my own cultural level, just being anxious won't help much. Wang Dalai Lama said truthfully, General Shao is the most cultured and familiar among us people with the Ming dynasty. I think you should come. Master Wang, this is not appropriate. Guo Kang shook his head decisively and threw the troublesome matter back. The trade with the Ming dynasty is the most promising source of wealth for the future of our Roman Empire, and it is of great significance. That's why the Crown Prince personally took charge. How could Guo, as a foreign minister, intervene in such a matter without authorization? Besides, the situation between countries is too complex for an inexperienced junior to do well. He added, it's not that I don't want to help, I'm really powerless. Lama Wang hesitated for a moment and said helplessly, General Shao is meticulous in his thinking and has indeed considered Zhou Dao. It's the old man who is too anxious. Oh my. Wang Dalai shook his brush and sighed. In the past, working with General Guo used to be straightforward. Now, perhaps it's because the national system was not perfect at that time, and everyone didn't pay much attention to these twists and turns. You just bully my adoptive father, to be honest. If I were like him, I would be afraid of being fooled by you and working for nothing. Guo Kang muttered inwardly. This old slick obviously wants to sell off his old age and use his adoptive father to pressure him. However, Guo Kang was already prepared. Confucius said, if you are not in your position, do not plan your politics. My Guo family was a prominent family in the Central Plains, and my father had limited conditions during his time, so he could only take power in a hurry. Now that the national system has been established, of course we must abide by the rules. Guo Kang arched his hand and calmly replied, this matter is still a matter of hard work, Master Wang. Wang Dalai Lama clearly does not have the qualifications of Confucius, and when he said so, he couldn't answer for a moment. Hey! You kid, you're not like your godfather, but rather like your godmother. Wang Dalai threw the dust on the table and said helplessly, old man, I'm sorry for the mistake this time, but I really can't do anything about it. For your sake, why don't you go help me? Oh, that's right. I have a few cases related to your family here. He thought for a moment and then suggested, I'll help you settle them. Can you also do me a favor? If Tuohuan can't write well, someone around Dahan will have to chew their tongues and say, "Old man, I don't have the ability to even assist Tai Ji well. I can't be this great shepherd." Guo Kang and Wang Dalai Lama have also had multiple interactions, and have seen negotiations between his adoptive mother and him. Although this old master has always had thick skin, when it comes to this, he basically won't talk nonsense. As the patriarch, Wang Dalai Lama is not only responsible for religious affairs, but also has a main job of exploring and collecting intelligence from various dioceses under his jurisdiction. Especially in most places like this, foreign envoys and merchants frequently come and go, and nobles from various parts of the Khanate often gather here. The Greeks in the city are also famous rebellious experts, and it is difficult to rest assured if they do not try to keep an eye on them. And the church has its own sect, with its own way of inquiring about information. So, it can provide a lot of help in this regard. There are some small pieces of information in the city that have been collected by Wang Dalai Lama. Guo Kang even suspected that the ancient Roman emperors had their trusted eunuchs serve as shepherds, which may have been a consideration in this regard. However, on the other hand, if it were really a big deal, Wang Dalai Lama should have reported it to the Khanate long ago, or at least directly informed his adoptive father and mother. Finding him shouldn't be particularly important. Correspondingly, it shouldn't be a big problem for him to help Tuohuan. Perhaps, as he said, it's just two people, Wang Dalai Lama and Tuohuan, with insufficient cultural level. After thinking for a moment, he decided to give it a try. "I'm not as smart as my adoptive mother, I just understand some big principles." Guo Kang first clarified his attitude and then asked, "What happened this time?" "It's still those messy things." Wang Dalai Lama breathed a sigh of relief as he was willing to respond. He turned to greet a young man busy on the ladder inside and said, "Wu Han, bring the confiscated things." Upon hearing this, Wu Han climbed down the ladder against the bookshelf, walked to the table, and took out a few booklets. When handing it to Guo Kang, he also bowed to him as a token of respect. He has a strong physique and several obvious calluses on his hands, which are obviously left by long-term use of weapons. Guo Kang thought for a moment and seemed to have seen this person recently in his father's shogunate. The shogunate of his adoptive father Guo Daxia recruits a large number of talented young people every year. Among them, those who perform well are elected to the Khanate as clerks, guards, and reserve officials. Before taking control of Dadu, the Han feudal lords of the Khanate began to prepare for talent in this way. After the fierce Answers war, it has become an important selection channel. Wu Han may be one of the talents recruited and recommended by the Guo family, and it is not surprising to know Guo Kang. "There are more and more of these things," Wang Dalai Lama commented beside them as they greeted each other. "Greeks learn printing faster than we thought. Is it that kind of unattractive thing again?" Guo Kang asked. "Greeks, printed materials, and related to the Guo family. He doesn't open a booklet, he knows what content will be inside." As Wang Dalai Lama said, printing has not been passed down for long. The Greeks learned this technique from visitors from the East, but did not engage in any serious business. The most popular print nowadays is the Spring Palace articles written by local writers. Of course, if it's just this level, he wouldn't be able to say anything. Wang Dalai Lama has also said that the same thing happens in cities in Han China. No matter where, what culture, or what era, the category that readers love the most and make the most money from selling seems to always be in this category. The real trouble is that his family members often appear in books as important characters. Although the child was adopted and even came from another time and space, over the years, the Guo couple treated him as if he had left, and Guo Kang was also very grateful for this. So it seems that these Greek pranks are very annoying. He sighed and opened one of the books. Sure enough, after a few glances, I saw the familiar character again. My adoptive father, Guo Daxia, has a fierce face, a strong physique, and his heroic deeds are widely circulated. He is the favorite type of erotic story character among Greeks, and he is taken by them every day to flirt with various distinctive male protagonists. Guo Kang thought for a while and decided not to tell the rest of the family, especially not to let his adoptive mother and elder sister know. But he has no good way to handle this matter. What does Master Wang think should be done about this matter? He asked. What do you think? Wang Dalai Lama played a trick and turned to ask Wu Han. I think. Find a chance and teach them a lesson. Wu Han didn't expect to answer himself, hesitated for a moment, and replied. If Greek citizens were afraid of being taught a lesson, they wouldn't have been caught by us until now. Wang Dalai Lama shook his head and said, these people are not even afraid of the emperor. They are no longer ordinary troublemakers, and they definitely can't be controlled. So, what should we do? Wu Han said foolishly, clearly unprepared. What does our church do? Asked Lama Wang. Shepherds. Wu Han stood up straight and said loudly. Call the substitute shepherd. Wang Dalai Lama was very dissatisfied and picked up a brush to whip him. Have you really learned it or not? How could you still make mistakes with such professional vocabulary? Remember, we are going to guide faith, he reiterated. This land of Europa is a place with a strong religious atmosphere, and the books printed by the people also involve religion to some extent. Our church needs to review these religious works to avoid spreading heretical ideas and deceiving believers. Do you understand now? I understand now. Master Wang is still brilliant. Although Wu Han's face was full of doubts, he quickly nodded. At least the attitude of Wang Dalai Lama is still acceptable, and he did not continue to investigate. He lifted the big hat that supported the shepherd's head, shook the dust again, and beckoned Guo Kang to leave with him. Master Wang, can this be effective? Guo Kang still felt a bit uneasy. On the one hand, we need to consider the level of mischief among Greek citizens, and on the other hand, the efficiency of the church is also highly questionable. This system is inherited from the Eastern Roman Empire, which belongs to the highly civilized type in present-day Taixi. It has already taken the form of a bureaucratic system. And the cost is that the drawbacks of bureaucracy are also significant. The teachings of King Dalai Lama may not be well received by Greek priests, and it is likely that they will not be able to be implemented in endless official documents and repetitive instructions. By then, his adoptive father's booklet will have been serialized, and he may not be able to control it. The old man has his own clever plan. Young master, there's no need to worry too much. Wang Dalai Lama was quite confident. I'll trouble you to take care of Tuahuan Taiji's side. Tuahuan is an old acquaintance of Guo Kang and the only legitimate son of His Majesty the Roman Khanate Emperor. The Empress has only given birth to such a son, which has been loved by her father since childhood, and she takes him with her every day. However, later on, the father realized that following him and the big and rough soldiers around seemed not very conducive to the child's growth. So in recent years, Tuahuan has been thrown into the library next to the Nyangnyang temple by his father and started following everyone to school. His study is located on the second floor of that building. Wang Dalai Lama and Guo Kang, familiar with the road, arrived at this spacious room. Standing guard at the entrance were two rotating Serbian attendants, dressed up as small officers of the Timid army, belonging to the famous Proton army in terms of organization. Of course, by this time, according to the Christian calendar, it was already the 15th century, and there was no real cowardice in the world. Although they still have a name, they only have a title left. They are no longer the elite troops that could go to the battlefield back then. Protons are just serving as attendants and doing some miscellaneous work. In theory, only the guards of the Great Khan were called Xianxue, but the last one to have a serious Xianxue army was already Mengge Khan a long time ago. Mengge Khan died in a daze on the battlefield in the east, and his second brother Kublai Khan proclaimed himself as the Great Khan. But many Mongolian nobles believe that Ali Buj, the younger brother of Mongo, is the legitimate heir. As a result, the timid Shui army, who were originally dispatched by Kublai Khan, took advantage of the opportunity to send spirits and all fled to seek refuge with Ali Buj. Although Kublai Khan used the Han army to eliminate Ali Buj, the timid Shui inherited from the Genghis Khan era also disappeared. Finally, the feudal lords of the Han dynasty sent out troops and gathered a military guard army for him. As a result, the Yuan dynasty had a new guard army. The original timid Shui, although nominally rebuilt, has lost its war function and only worked as a laborer in the palace, competing with eunuchs for work. Its main function was to provide qualifications for the noble children. The fear of Shui in Rome is also similar. The Purple Horde Khanate was formed by a wild roadster, and after becoming an empire, it was only for the sake of face that this army was formed. But it can also be imagined that there are mostly service personnel inside. Moreover, in addition to the majority, there were also territories and palaces on the grasslands, so the tasks of the Roman cowards were actually more complicated. Later, a Frenchman who traveled here gave a reliable suggestion. According to his plan, the timid Shui could be divided into two parts. One part was newly recruited in Dadu, mainly from the city, responsible for standing guard, cleaning, cooking, serving tea, and pouring water, called the young timid Shui Jun. The other part was originally located in the grassland territory, mainly composed of grassland herders who were responsible for herding sheep for the Great Khan, known as the Old Cowardly Shui Army. Both sides fulfilled their respective duties and successfully completed various tasks. The purity of Xianshui has greatly improved. Those who stand guard like these two belong to the typical young cowardly Shui Jun, but it is unclear whose family's children they are. They informed the room and opened the door, inviting Dalai Lama Wang and Guo Kang to enter. As soon as Guo Kang entered the door, a tall figure suddenly rushed towards him and shouted loudly, "My dear Ananda! I miss you so much." He put in a lot of effort to push aside the overly enthusiastic detachment. There is a little boy sitting on the side of the room, looking at them awkwardly. "Oh, this is my cousin Constantine from the Palialis family. My mother said he's also old enough to go to school with us," Tuahuan realized and introduced to Guo Kang. "Ah. Hello." Guo Kang had not yet regained his senses, but simply said hello before turning to ask Tuahuan, "What exactly happened to you? You're so excited." "It's really a bit difficult for us to write that national document," Tuahuan said helplessly. "Father Khan asked me to change the writing style that the great Ming Khanate likes and establish a relationship with others, but I don't know how to do this. I can only look for help everywhere. If you come to me, you also need to consider whether I can do it. After all, what I know is jokes from unreliable sources that cannot be confirmed." Guo Kang complained, "Forget it, I'll do my best to help. Let me see how you're doing now." At the desk sat a young man who was also scratching his ears and cheeks, with a piece of paper in front of him. When he saw the situation, he turned the manuscript over and showed it to Guo Kang. It was written: "Great Qin, Great Rome, Walusi Paisai Khan, to Dunta Walusi Zhu Tianping He Han. There's nothing left behind. You're not a bit difficult, isn't it that you haven't written it at all?" Guo Kang didn't even know what to say for a moment. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. The Road of Iron Pot. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The Road of Iron Pot. For Guo Kang's evaluation, Tuahuan is not surprising. "You know the level of everyone here," he spread out his hand and said, "among so many people, not a single one is, well, a literary and virtuous minister. It took us a lot of effort to write these things. We can only do so much on our own now. Don't worry, it's not all up to you to handle it," he added. "I even called for several helpers." Seeing Tuahuan lying flat, Guo Kang could only nod to show understanding. He turned back and glanced at the only line of text. From the wording above, it can be seen that Tuahuan and others have indeed considered it carefully. The name, Great Qin and Great Roman Walusi, has only been officially used in recent years. Guo Kang believes that it should be imitating the address of the Yuan dynasty. The word Wulusi belongs to a grassland characteristic noun. Generally speaking, it has a dual meaning of both the people and the land. The grassland is vast and sparsely populated, and people often move, so simply looking at territory is not very meaningful. And a Wulusi can be simply understood as a group of followers and the various grasslands they occupy, which constitutes a unit of enfeoffment. When the Mongolian regime was first established, its name was Yike Mongolian Wulusi. Translated directly, it's actually quite clumsy, which means very large Mongolian territory. Later, Kublai Khan proclaimed himself emperor and used the Yuan as his national title. In documents given to other Khanates, the full name of the Yuan dynasty was written as Great Yuan Great Mongol Wulusi. In the official statement of the Yuan dynasty, the Yuan means Mongolia, and Mongolia means the Yuan. These two meanings are the same. In some literature, it is simply written as the Great Mongolian Wulusi, known as the Great Yuan. As for why the meaning is the same and why they all need to be included, it's probably important to repeat the important thing. Of course, the above are all statements made by the Yuan dynasty itself. It is difficult to say whether other Khanates regard the Yuan regime as Mongolia, but it depends on the specific time and situation. For the current Purple Horde Khanate, this writing style can be borrowed. Daqin was a term used by ancient Central Plains people to refer to Rome, while Rome was a local language but expressed the same meaning. When these two are stacked together, it becomes the Roman Empire known as the Great Qin, which should be easier to understand and more formal. It's easier to understand when it comes to Byzantine Khan. The official title of the Emperor of the Purple Horde is a Greek title called Basileus. As early as when Zhejiang was still operating in Bulgaria and was an ordinary force, everyone knew this name. In order to save trouble, it is usually called Pai Sai Han, in colloquial language. Over time, it became customary and became the exclusive sweat of the Roman Emperor. And the latter half of the sentence is a title for the Ming dynasty. There are actually many names in the Ming dynasty, and there are a lot of names in various Mongol Khanates alone. The most popular way is to use the country name directly, called de Ming Wulu Si. Alternatively, add a prefix representing the ethnic group and call it Khitan Daming Kingdom. In the correspondence between the Ming dynasty and its vassals and border guard stations, it is often referred to as Dordla de Wulusi or Dordla de Hiza. Literally translated, it means mainland China. In foreign documents, the Ming dynasty's official favorite translated name is Dunta Wulusi, which means the central country. This is an officially designated name, which can be considered the most formal Mongolian address. Using this name can indeed make Ming dynasty people happier. As for the final, Zhu Tianping He Han, it was the current Ming dynasty emperor. Guo Kang himself was also surprised to find that in this world, Zhu Biao, the eldest son of Ming Taizu Zhu Yuanzhang, did not die of illness early, but ascended to the throne normally, with the reign name Tianping. Guo Kang realized at that time that the changes in the world may not be as simple as the inner power of his adoptive father. Hehan is a respectful title above sweat. If an ordinary Khan is a king, then Hehan is the emperor. In the Yuan dynasty, this word was directly translated as emperor. The term Zhu Tianping He Han is also a customary usage. In short, the good news at present is that in this short sentence, the wording that needs special attention and both parties are concerned about has been basically considered by Tuahuan and others, and it is obvious that they have carefully verified and deliberated. The bad news is that the Tuahuan team has been deliberating until now and has only written this sentence. Of course, there is indeed no other way. As Tuahuan himself said, his subordinates are indeed not of this material. In order to maintain balance and also attract nobles from all over the country, almost all of his attendants and courtiers around him were Bulgarians and Serbs. And the reason behind it is actually that the Greek women in the court were too dominant. Marriage with locals is a common option to gain more support. Starting from the southward migration of the Purple Horde, almost all the legitimate wives of the great Khans throughout history were Greeks, with only the grandfather who had fallen out of love. The Purple Horde's male lord, Basil Jericho Borzinus, was an exception. Daughters from the ancient Roman tribes, who held power over the inner court for generations. The Khanate's rule was not small, but the princesses and noblewomen from Bulgaria, Serbia, and Russia could not compete with these cunning Greek women. Even the Great Khan and the Zhugwa people are often tormented. The early Khanate was still polygamous, and this sign was already very obvious. Later on, as the Khanate became more Roman, monogamy became mainstream, and the advantage of Greek noblewomen could no longer be reversed. The Khanate needed the support of the Greeks, but they could not completely control the court. Therefore, in response, successive great Khans had to cultivate a team of successors from a young age, allowing them to get along with talents from other ethnic groups early on, so as not to be manipulated by their mother and uncle's family. Among them, it includes early marriage with Guo Kang and others, as well as selecting these Serbian junior followers. However, these people are still good at fighting, and it is too difficult for them to engage in diplomacy with the Ming dynasty. The problem is that the relationship with the Ming dynasty is also very important for the Khanate. They have to take on this job sooner or later, they can't avoid it. Commerce is crucial for the Khanate. The reason why Constantinople is prosperous is because it is stuck at the mouth of the Black Sea, where goods from all directions have to be transferred and gathered. Once the commercial route is monopolized and transferred by others, it will soon suffer huge losses, even becoming a bottomless pit that only enters but cannot exit, and in turn devouring the empire's economy. The Golden Horde had a positive example back then. During the reign of the Bi Khan, the Khanate was extremely powerful, and from the Yuan dynasty to Bulgaria, it was the territory of the Great Khan. The Khanate invested heavily in building and maintaining roads and stations, and deployed heavy troops along the way. The caravan does not even need to carry food, hay, or hire guides, because as long as money is given, the stations and settlements along the way will provide all the necessary supplies. Don't worry about looting either, because all the tribes along the way have been defeated by the Khan. This makes trade extremely smooth. Starting from Yuan, with the time for loading and unloading goods and land and water transportation along the way, it only takes 270 days to reach Europe. And these investments have also brought huge returns. The grassland passage maintained by the Golden Horde once replaced the ancient Silk Road that passed through Central Asia and Persia due to its proximity and convenience. Commodities from the east continue to flow into the capital of the Khanate, Belgosele, and then to various parts of Europe and West Asia. These goods brought unimaginable wealth to the Khanate before. Arab travelers record that the city on this grassland has surpassed the cities of Persia and the two rivers in terms of prosperity. Along with the entire Ras region, they have entered an unprecedented era of prosperity. And it will probably be a long time since then. Among these goods, silk was the earliest famous. But if we look at the trading volume, the largest ones should be porcelain and iron. Especially in maritime trade, ironware accounts for the largest proportion of weight. Whether at sea or on land, the main type of iron export is a large iron pot. The so-called Maritime Silk Road can actually be called the Iron Pot Road. It can be said that the iron pot is the lifeline of the Khanate. This can be seen from many places. For example, during the late Yuan dynasty, Emperor Shun's name was Tuhuan Timur, which means iron pot. The emperor directly called it iron pot, which shows how important this thing is. Lien Tuahuan himself, this name actually means pot. Interested friends can take a look at the excavation records of the sunken ship, Nanhai No. 1. That ship carried hundreds of tons of iron. In addition, a new book friend group has been created. 739876386, welcome everyone to join us, end of this chapter. Chapter 4. The Orthodox Yuan Empire of the Han Ethnic Group, Part 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. The Orthodox Yuan Empire of the Han Ethnic Group, Part 1. If commercial routes are blood vessels that transport wealth one by one, then the East is the heart that pumps blood. During the Song and Yuan dynasties, border management was quite lenient, and most goods could enter and exit freely. But the Ming dynasty seriously lacked the spirit of free trade, and when they came to buy something from him, they had to find ways to make him happy first, which was very difficult. However, the highest profit products are all produced by his family. So, in order to make a living, one also has to bow down to others. These diplomatic measures are one of them. The importance of this matter is well known to everyone. However, the Tuahuan team is indeed lacking in strength. Although he looks silly, Tuahuan is actually younger than Guo Kang, who is only 15 years old this year. It's not that diplomacy is not allowed in this grade, but looking at him like that, he's not someone to be gone luo. As for the people around him, not to mention them. Finding Guo Kang is probably also for this reason. Although his adoptive father Guo Daxia has always been pure, his adoptive mother Huang is quite famous. The Huang clan had a prosperous cultural background and had already gained a great reputation in the Ilkhanate when they migrated to Persia. Later, the Khanate collapsed, and Mr. Huang led his tribe to avoid the war and then migrated to a small island in the Mediterranean. The Huang family is known as the Peach Blossom Stone Huang family and still uses this name to commemorate their homeland. This island is also known as Peach Blossom Island. The Persians and Greeks around them all respect them very much, and whenever this name is mentioned, scholars will remember it. Unfortunately, although Guo Kang has been making up for it for a few years, the gap in cultural level is still quite significant. His adoptive mother repeatedly tried to discipline him severely and demanded that he concentrate on his studies, but was persuaded by his adoptive father. The saying goes that only when books are used can one hate less. It was only at this critical moment that he began to doubt whether his adoptive father had indulged him too much. "Who else did you ask for help with?" he turned to ask Tuahuan. "I also invited Sun Wen Yuan, a high-ranking official from Sun," Tuahuan replied. "Are you treating Sun 100000?" Guo Kang was taken aback and said, "It's a mistake. Can he help us deal with the Ming dynasty?" "Don't worry, young Master Guo." Wang Dalai Lama said on the side, "Javanese Yuan is not an iron block. There are many connections among their group. This Sun official, the old man, can persuade him to help." "Okay." Guo Kang couldn't say anything. Sun Dogwan, named E and styled Wen Yuan, claimed to come from the Yuan court in Java and is a well-known maritime merchant today. Last year, he came to Constantinople and had several big business deals with the Purple Horde. He also went to various places along the Black Sea coast for research, and during this time, he happened to be resting in the city. Guo Kang has also talked to him a few times before. According to his own introduction, his ancestors were famous big merchants in Suzhou during the Yuan dynasty, and later went to Yangzhou for business. They were involved in both silk and porcelain on the surface and private salt on the surface. Quickly, he accumulated a huge amount of wealth, and his family was given the nickname Sun 100000 by borrowing the ancient poem, wrapping his waist with 100,000 guan and riding a crane to Yangzhou, which greatly praised his wealth. As the head of this generation's family, business partners from the Southeast Islands to Egypt are accustomed to using this nickname to refer to him, and this is the origin. Guo Kang also learned that in this world, during the Yuan army's expedition to Java, they successfully defeated the chieftain of the indigenous people who had planned to attack them, forcing the local states to surrender and stand firm. By the end of the Yuan dynasty, Jiangnan was also plunged into war, with people and horses from all walks of life fighting tirelessly, leaving most of the court powerless. Many people chose to go to sea to escape and flee to the Nanyang area where the Yuan dynasty government still existed. Later, Zhang Shicheng was defeated by Zhu Yuanzhang, and his supporters fled one after another, leading to another wave of going to sea. As one of Zhang Shiqing's great capitalists, the Sun family was able to escape in a timely manner at this time by leveraging the advantage of year-round maritime operations. After several twists and turns, I finally settled in Nanyang. The great merchants such as Sun were wealthy and had their own thugs, servants, and fleet. In these days, merchants, pirates, and even the navy are often interchangeable identities. With these strengths, they gathered together and claimed to still worship Emperor Shun as the main deity, using the name of the Yuan dynasty. Because its important stronghold is on the island of Java, it is also known as the Javanese Yuan. The relationship between Java Yuan and Ming dynasty is quite bad. Sun, who has directly fought in battle, does not care, and many other wealthy businessmen and tycoons also share the same feeling. The management of the Yuan dynasty was loose, and as long as they paid money, they did not openly rebel. The court was often too lazy to manage, making their power quite huge. Like Sun himself, even if his hometown is lost, he can still dominate the region with the ships in his hands and the shops and shipyards that his family has long operated in the Nanyang region. But the management of the Ming dynasty was much stricter. Sun Shirwan pointed out that the government restricts the freedom of merchants and deprives them of their legitimate rights over servants. The court's demands were excessive, constantly competing with the people for benefits and seizing the wealth that merchants had worked hard to accumulate. After the founding of the country, it also restricted navigation, suppressed free trade, and wanted to monopolize the huge profits of ocean trade on its own. Therefore, the great merchants in Jiangnan all missed the yuan. Persisting in using the name of the Yuan dynasty is also because of this. After the founding of the Ming dynasty, there were still people constantly escaping from the country and pursuing freedom. There were no fleeing individuals, but there were also many who secretly contacted them, helping to smuggle goods in their daily lives. During the war, they spread the news and hoped that the Dayuan heavenly soldier could fight back. Sun Shirwan believes that this is the will of the people and also one of the sources of confidence for them to confront the Ming dynasty despite being at a disadvantage in power. At this time, the king of Liang, who was enfeoffed in Yunnan by the Yuan dynasty, was attacked by the Ming army, defeated, and fled to Myanmar. The king of Myanmar did not welcome the king of Liang, and both sides fought along the way. The maritime merchants saw the opportunity and invited the exiled forces of the king of Liang. Therefore, the Yuan army marched southeast, entered Kampa through Siam, and joined forces with the Javanese merchants to receive supplies and support. The Vietnamese Qin dynasty was also afraid of the Ming army that had already pursued Myanmar, so they decided to join forces with them. With the mediation of everyone, the Siamese and Vietnamese armies joined forces with the Yuan army and maritime merchants to repel the pursuing Ming army. However, the Ming dynasty seemed to have turned its head and refused to give up. 2 years later, another Ming army invaded Vietnam from the north and fought until near the capital city of Shenglong before being repelled and driven away. After more than 4 years, several Ming armies arrived from Yunnan, Guangxi, and the sea in multiple routes, and the coalition army finally couldn't resist this time. Shenglong was captured by the Ming army, and the king of Liang was defeated and committed suicide. The Qin dynasty in Vietnam was soon abolished by the Ming dynasty, and the remaining soldiers and defeated generals of other feudal lords continued to flee south. The Sun family and others gathered many people and horses, and once again sailed out to sea to escape. Fortunately, the Ming army really couldn't catch up this time, giving them some breathing time. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. The Orthodox Yuan Empire of the Han Ethnic Group, Part 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. The Orthodox Yuan Empire of the Han Ethnic Group, Part 2, during this period, the Javanese Yuan reorganized its army and built warships. On the other hand, scholars are also pondering. Even though the great Yuan was so benevolent and powerful, theoretically speaking, he should have been able to maintain the country's power for a long time. Why did he disappear so quickly? Only by understanding this issue can we avoid repeating the same mistakes. They believe that the reason for the decline of the Yuan dynasty is not difficult to summarize, which is the endless internal turmoil. Both within the Khanate system and between the Great Khan and the Mongolian nobles, there has been a long-term lack of stable institutions, which can only be maintained by a few excellent leaders. A slight disturbance and contradiction can lead to serious conflict and internal friction, causing greater damage to the already unstable order. And this fragile system was brought by the Mongols. These people's organizations were too primitive and their political level was too poor, ultimately ruining the good situation of the Yuan dynasty. It can be seen that the Yuan is good everywhere, but these Mongolians are not. To revive the national power of the past and restore the national power of Taizu and Shizu, we need to kick out these guys who can cause harm. Without the Mongolians, the Yuan will be better. Therefore, the Javanese Yuan dynasty called on merchants and scholars to unite and establish a more complete Yuan dynasty regime. In their dealings with Western trading countries, they used official names in Latin and Greek, which were called the Orthodox Yuan Empire of the Han ethnic group. Guo Kang always felt that this theory was a bit strange, and how to look at it, the Javanese Yuan is actually neither orthodox nor great, let alone an empire. After all, they are just a federation established by a group of merchants. Moreover, not only he, but many others also find it strange. Yuan wrote to him that the Roman attribute of the Holy Roman Empire may be higher than that of the Yuan dynasty in Java. However, Sun 100,000's entourage told them that the excluded Mongolians here were only the upper-class Mongolian nobles. Of course, maritime merchants did not exclude all Mongols. While the Yuan dynasty was still alive, they frequently purchased Mongolian slaves. Until now, there are still a certain number of Mongolian slaves and soldiers in Java. This approach has also resulted in some strange outcomes. For example, recently, when the two sides were at war, there were more Mongolian officers in the Ming dynasty army than in the Javanese Yuan side. Yuan suspects that this Yuan dynasty is still called the Yuan dynasty. But the Javanese Yuan side stated that the Yuan dynasty was not the Yuan dynasty of the Mongol Great Khan, but rather a Yuan dynasty shared by the Great Khan and the literati. During the reign of Emperor Genghis Khan, the Mongols were still capable of using it. When the founder Xue Chan Khan arrived, many tribes and even sect kings focused on causing trouble and needed to be taught a lesson. After the reign of Emperor Shizu, even the great sweaters and nobles have declined generation by generation. So, they should now replace Changshangshan and Genghis Khan to discipline these Mongolians well, in order to be worthy of the great Yuan. Yuan said that these people can only give up. Anyway, it's a matter on the side of Kublai Khan's family. He claims to be a descendant of Batu, so it doesn't seem necessary to take care of him. However, Guo Kang still has great doubts about whether they can be helpful. Because the Javanese Yuan and Ming dynasties have been rivals for decades. After the successive downfalls of Vietnam and the Liang dynasty, the Javanese Yuan had become the biggest threat to the Ming dynasty in the southeast direction. The Javanese pirates, with the cooperation of the remnants of the Yuan dynasty in various forces such as Zhang Shicheng, Fangguizhen, and Qin Yuding, frequently attacked the coast and plundered everywhere. At the beginning, the Ming dynasty attempted to cut off their connections and suppress the rampant piracy by banning the sea. However, this tactic is still effective against small groups of pirates, but it is clearly not enough against forces with regular armies like the Javanese Yuan. The Ming dynasty attempted to migrate coastal people from important areas, clearing the land in areas that were convenient for landing, and trying to cut off the supply of Javanese pirates, forcing them to leave as soon as possible. However, the migration behavior has affected the livelihoods of local people and instead caused greater dissatisfaction. Fishermen and small merchants who have lost their source of livelihood have gathered on the coast, engaged in fishing and black market trade without authorization, and even voluntarily joined the Javanese dollar. The government has repeatedly issued bans, but they have not been effective and have instead led to a worsening of the situation. The Javanese army even openly landed, attacked states and counties, and looted government treasuries. Cooperating with the remnants of the Yuan dynasty in the northeast region, they launched multiple attacks, causing the court to be extremely anxious. In the 12th year of the Hongwu reign, the Hu Weiyong case broke out. Someone reported that he had secret dealings with the Kampa state, which was an important buffer state between the Ming dynasty and the Javanese Empire. The incident quickly escalated and eventually evolved into a major case of colluding with the Javanese Yuan to rebel, causing a huge impact on the entire court and the public. However, through this major case, the Ming dynasty finally began to change its mindset and no longer continued to harass fishermen. Instead, it attempted to strike down supporters of the Javanese Yuan in the middle and upper classes, while also starting to build naval forces to prepare to eliminate the enemy at sea. The navy is very money-burning and continues to burn money. When the army is not in use, it is possible to cultivate farmland, but even if the ship is abandoned there, it needs to be maintained frequently with money. Moreover, a ship often has little effect, at least in order to generate value. It is necessary to ensure that the size of one's navy does not differ significantly from that of the enemy. A single investment is not a single warship, but an entire fleet. So, the Central Plains dynasties often lacked enthusiasm for this. Expanding a navy is often only feasible in two situations. Either, the damage caused by the enemy is too great, far exceeding the high cost of the navy. Either, the benefits brought by the navy are high, making these costs tolerable. The Ming dynasty was forced to accept the former. But when a navy is established and needs to be maintained for a long time due to war, it becomes natural to pursue the latter to reduce financial pressure. In fact, ocean shipping routes are not only important for Zhejiang, but also a huge source of wealth for any country. Although the Ming dynasty was the birthplace of various refined goods and looked very prosperous, such a large tax revenue was not a small number for them. These benefits don't matter when you can't eat them, but once you experience them twice, you don't want to let go. The second round of war mainly took place at sea, although not as large as the previous one, it involved a larger scope. The navy of Java and the Ming dynasty, from Ryukyu to Manchuria, turned the entire Nanyang into a battlefield. The Ming dynasty once built cities and stationed troops in Manchuria, attempting to block the strait, cut off the trade channels of the Javanese Yuan, and trapped them to death. Java Yuan, on the other hand, circled south in search of a new route while forming an alliance with the Timur Empire, driving away the Ming army in recapturing the stronghold. And a few years later, the Ming army sailed south from Jiaoji, attempting to compete for the trade line again. The scattered battle lasted until the death of Zhu Yuanzhang. However, after a few years of cessation, Zhu Biao, the successor of Tianping Emperor, launched a new war, trying to start from Luzon Island, and the two sides fought again. Strictly speaking, this round has been ongoing until now and has not yet come to an end. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Maritime Trade. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Maritime Trade. Everyone in the purple tent knows that the Javanese Yuan and Ming dynasties have long been hostile. Therefore, Guo Kang was very skeptical that seeking help from Sun Shirwan was a self-deprecating request. If we include the vassal states and tribes, the power of the Javanese Yuan almost covers half of the Southeast Asia, making it appear to be very powerful. But in reality, their territory is dotted, rather than contiguous like the central plains of the Ming dynasty, the Hezhong of the Timur Khanate, and the Balkans of the Zhejiang. The true territory of Java is a series of large and small seaports and surrounding ancillary areas. Merchants use these port networks to provide supply stations and safe havens for ships to maintain their shipping routes. Outside the port area, it is generally a handicraft gathering area, followed by large plantations, mines, and forest farms. The handicraft industry zone gathers a large number of craftsmen who, on the one hand, need to maintain ports and ships, and on the other hand, produce various commodities for trade. Forests provide timber for navigation, mines provide raw materials, and plantations provide food for nearby residents and economic crops for trafficking. Outside of these places, it has little to do with them. There are numerous indigenous communities of all sizes, located between various ports and outside the Java Yuan reclamation area. Some are just primitive tribes, while others have already formed relatively complete land states. The Javanese Yuan has average interest in them, only requiring them to obey themselves, join the trade network, abide by their own trade rules, and pay variable amounts of tribute. Some tribes with relatively reliable planting abilities will be required to plant designated crops, which will be centrally purchased by merchants. The upper limit of jurisdiction is generally the same. Previously, the major powers and hegemons in the Nanyang region adopted a structure known as the mandala system in later generations. For the indigenous people, although Javanese Yuan is more regulated, its overall nature is not much different. This is also a tacit understanding that has gradually formed with the local people over 100 years since the Yuan dynasty's conquest of Java. On the other hand, the Javanese Yuan cannot actually trust the locals. The armed forces of the Javanese Yuan were mainly composed of the servants and fleets of wealthy merchants such as the Sun family in Yangzhou, the Chen family in Fujian, and the Wu family in Linen. In addition, there were also the Nguyen and Hu clans who came to seek refuge after the annexation of Annam, Vietnam, by the Ming dynasty. After the defeat of King Liang, the Dali Duan clan and others escaped. These Han people from Jiangnan, Jiaoji people, and Dali people constitute the core part of the army. Due to the relatively small number of troops compared to the Ming army, the Javanese Yuan would also organize larger peripheral armies as supplements, with Kampa and Siam being one of the main sources. They swayed back and forth between the Ming dynasty and the Javanese Yuan in order to maintain independence, so they often turned a blind eye to the latter's recruitment of troops on their own territory. In addition, the Javanese dollar also widely recruits mercenaries to fight for itself. To the east, there is a Ronin gang from Japan. To the west, there are Turkic-style armed groups in exile after the Delhi Sultanate was defeated by Timur. These people, although their combat effectiveness varies, are also supplements to the Javanese meta-military power. As for the indigenous people on various islands in the south, the Javanese people have little confidence in their combat effectiveness. In the early days, indigenous armies from vassals were also mobilized for combat, but their extremely poor performance made Javanese meta-officers believe that their side effects had outweighed the positive effects. Most indigenous armies have little effective effect except for replenishing personnel, and only consume supplies in vain. They always collapse quickly on the battlefield, bringing negative psychological effects to friendly forces. It's better not to bring this kind of person than to take him with you. In theory, if trained rigorously, indigenous armies should not have such poor combat effectiveness. But the Javanese Yuan has dealt with various indigenous forces. Many of them only temporarily surrendered and harbored resentment towards their actions of competing for ports and land. Therefore, the Javanese Yuan was also not confident in training them, only occasionally dispatching a few vassals to serve as cannon fodder, and could not even face the Ming army, only to suppress other tribes. With the expansion of trade, the ocean-going trade routes have become increasingly smooth, and they have gradually discovered some new ways. Timur once marched westward and penetrated the eastern coast of the Mediterranean, ushering in a long-lost unified situation here. Afterwards, the smooth trade route allowed an endless supply of Slavic slaves to depart from southern Russia, pass through the Caucasus, enter the Persian Gulf along the two rivers, and then transport to the east. Shortly thereafter, the Purple Horde also joined and opened a route from Constantinople to the port of Damascus, allowing the flow of slaves to continue to increase. These white slaves were not familiar with their land and had different languages. For the Javanese people, Turkish slaves were not reliable and could easily provoke anger from local kinship tribes, but white slaves did not have these shortcomings. Those who are more loyal and robust can also be added to the army. Therefore, since then, Javanese currency has become one of the main buyers of white slaves, continuously filling their plantations in Java, Luzon, and Borneo. Due to the Ming dynasty's monopoly on a large number of handicraft products and constant attempts to crack down on the trade of Javanese currency has been trying to replace the increasingly risky and unstable Ming dynasty smuggled goods with self-produced products in recent years. These silk, ceramics, and ironware, although still somewhat problematic, also have a considerable market in the West, allowing them to make considerable profits. However, Western buyers often cannot provide valuable and long-term supply of bulk products, allowing the ship to be pulled back. If you don't fill it up and return, it's a waste of precious transportation capacity. The slave trade across the Indian Ocean precisely made up for this deficiency. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. The Strongest Husband, Emperor Timur's Uncle. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The Strongest Husband, Emperor Timur's Uncle. Due to these reasons, the relationship between Rome and the Javanese and Ming dynasties was actually quite subtle. On the one hand, the Khanate was not satisfied with the Ming dynasty's restrictive policies, as they undoubtedly created barriers to trade and affected income. On the other hand, Javanese Yuan is not really a good guy either. They are essentially a group of second-tier traffickers, who really control the waters of the Nanyang Sea. In the future, any Eastern goods they buy, whether they are Ming dynasty resale goods or Nanyang self-produced spices, silk, or porcelain, will definitely have to increase in price together. But the Purple Horde is too far from the east. By sea, either go to Syria and then land, either go to Egypt and then transfer to the Red Sea. In short, they cannot directly reach the Indian Ocean and participate directly in trade. In the later period of Basil Jericho's rule, the Khanate began to shift some of its attention to the south, attempting to find breakthroughs at sea. At this time, it was the time when the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt was embroiled in frequent internal strife and Timur rapidly rose in the east. The decline of Mamluk was actually expected. Although this country was once militarily strong, its political system is simply too crude. During this period, the core of the Mamluk dynasty was the Chincha slaves. These people were trafficked from the southern Russian grasslands and carefully selected and trained to become personal soldiers of the Sultan and various levels of military officers. Although nominally called a slave, every qualified Mamluk warrior can receive a fiefdom, which is actually a type of fiefdom knight. Officers are allowed to have different numbers of Mamluks according to their level, while the Sultan himself holds the most elite and largest branch within the dynasty. However, the politics of the Mamluk dynasty were highly unstable. Whenever a new Sultan ascends to the throne, he cleanses his former trusted officers and slaves. These people are certainly unwilling and will do their best to fight back. More than 100 years later, Mamluk, who had long suffered from internal friction, no longer had the same sharpness as before. The rise of the Purple Horde also unintentionally dealt a blow to the Mamluk dynasty. During the reign of Alexios Mirgan, the Khanate began to expand eastward along the north coast of the Black Sea, ultimately triggering a full-scale war within the Golden Horde, between the Purple Horde and the Blue Horde and White Horde. The fragmented Golden Tent cannot withstand the army of the Purple Tent, either being annexed or fleeing. No one expected that this achievement would not be a good thing for Zhejiang. It caused the balance between the armies of the southern and northern branches of the Khanate to be lost, leading to the assassination of Alexios and the first civil war known as the Civil War. Rome also entered a period of vacant Khanate and republican rule in the Nine Pillars, which had a profound impact on subsequent history. And they are not the only ones affected. The Mamluk dynasty, in order to maintain its rule, the upper class basically did not accept locals and only recruited imperial slave soldiers. But after the end of the war between the Purple Horde and the grasslands, the Khanate devoted itself to restoring order, and a large number of grassland people were pacified and recruited, leading to a significant reduction in the slave trade in Chincha. This has led to the challenge of the Caucasian Mamluks to the already shaky status of the Chincha Mamluk, and the internal stability of the regime has become increasingly unstable. At this time, Timur's rise in the east gave the Purple Horde a better opportunity. Timur was originally a small leader of the Western Chagatai Khanate, with few people and weak abilities, and almost no sense of presence. In the civil war between the Eastern and Western Chagatai Khanates, they rose to power through a combination of both sides. Although some people refer to him as the Timur Empire, due to his awkward background, Timur doesn't even have a prestigious title. Due to not being a member of the Golden Family, the Mongolian and Turkic tribes in Central Asia did not recognize him as a Khan, resulting in Timur being able to use the title of Emir year-round. Later, Timur defeated another warlord, Kushin, and took over the princess of Zikagatai from him. He then began calling himself Gulaigan. This word means sun.in.law in Mongolian. Back then, Genghis Khan recruited a group of men from other clans through matchmaking and incorporated them into his own ranks, thus becoming one of the titles associated with the Golden Family. In this way, Gulaigan became the most well-known name for Timur, to the extent that in the history of the Ming dynasty, he was directly referred to as Fu Ma Timur. Later on, the agent supported by Timur, White Horde Khan Tuachuo, lost his way and rebelled, relying on the former land of Golden Horde to frequently plunder Timur's lair. The Central Asian region. In order to solve this disaster, Timur personally led a large army to go on an expedition, while searching for allies everywhere to curb the power of Tuachuo lost. Coincidentally, the Purple Horde was also at war with various tribes on the grasslands at this time, and the two sides reached an instant agreement. Timur set out from the river, headed north into the grassland, and marched from east to west. The famous general of the Purple Horde, Grand Tutor Mymetinicus, led his army from Crimea to attack the Don and Volga rivers in the hinterland of the Golden Horde. The Timur army is of a large scale and is actually a Persianized composite army. Therefore, the Tuachuo Lost plan uses traditional grassland tactics to consume them as much as possible during the movement, and then chooses the opportunity to attack. However, the army of Mymetinicus crossed the Sea of Azov, posing a direct threat to the lost rear base. The left-behind Golden Horde nobleman was unable to break through the Purple Horde camp for a long time, and even was defeated in the opponent's counterattack. This caused the White Horde army to lose the strategic space for turning around, lose patience and get lost, and be forced to engage in a decisive battle with the Timur army in advance, ultimately losing. This war has established a good relationship between the two countries. The Purple Horde Khanate has discovered a serious lack of legitimacy in Timur's rule. Until now, Timur's theoretical legitimacy actually comes from his Western Chagatai wife and puppet Khan father.in.law. The country is so big, still holding the title of sun.in.law, it's really indescribable. So the Zhejiang side took the initiative to propose that they had abundant information on their side, and the former territory of the Chagatai Khanate, which had been through wars for a long time, may have lost many records. They can send professionals to study Timur's family tree and see if he is actually a member of the Golden Family. A group of scholars set off from Constantinople with great fanfare, with the cooperation of the Timurid regime, all the way to promote and finally arrived in Samarkand. The old scholars brought many archives of the Golden Horde, which were said to be from the Batu era, and after studying the local literature in Central Asia, it was indeed discovered that Timur's family was also a member of the long-lost Golden Family. In terms of seniority, it is still the uncle generation of Purple Horde Khan. So, everyone immediately persuaded and suggested that Uncle Timur sit on a mat to sweat, in order to have a proper reputation. The Timur regime has finally become a well-known and solid Timur Khanate. Timur was very grateful for this and sent a large amount of gold and silver treasures to Zhejiang as a gift. He also sent his fourth son Shaharu to lead a delegation for a return visit. However, before both sides could enjoy their victory for long, news came that Tuachuo Lost had made a comeback. Tuachuo Lost was also a generation of warlords, with considerable prestige on the grasslands. After being defeated, he still had many followers and quickly drove away the puppet nobles supported by Timur, and regained control of the old capital of the Golden Horde. Belgosale. Tuachuo Lost also learned a lesson this time and learned from the experience of the enemy's victory. He sent people to contact the dominant Ottoman Empire in the region of Asia Minor, as well as the Mamluk dynasty occupying Egypt, to unite and cause trouble for Timur. Timur was forced to contact Zhejiang again to send troops, preparing to solve the culprit Tuachuo lost first, and then transfer the army south to sweep away other enemies. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. The Battle of Stalingrad. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. The Battle of Stalingrad. In order to completely eliminate the forces of Tuachuo lost, Timur once again mobilized a large army to move north. Tuachuo lost was also unwilling to be outdone and assembled a larger army. However, before the war, the Mongols and Turks under the command of Tuachuo lost discovered that the army of Timur was different from them. Although theoretically speaking, the Timur Khanate is also a Mongol Turkic political regime, and its main force should be the nomadic cavalry of its headquarters, there are actually a large number of Persians in this army. The Persians have always been known for their weak and unbeatable soldiers. Filling these people into the front line indicates that Timur's strength has been greatly reduced, and he can only pretend to be a facade to give himself courage. So, the nobles under the command of Tuachuo lost fell into a blind disregard for the enemy, even ignoring the orders of the Khan himself and insisting on a decisive battle with Timur. However, the Persians under Timur's command had much higher combat effectiveness than expected, and the Golden Horde army was defeated instead. At this point, General Guo of the Purple Tent had already invaded Birgosalai, lost and homeless, and led a small number of defeated soldiers to flee to Lithuania. The former territory of the Golden Horde once again changed hands. Timur originally planned to completely destroy the Belgorsalai to prevent the growth of opponents who could threaten him. But the Purple Horde believed that in this situation, the enemy had lost the ability to make a comeback and there was no need to abandon this city. At that time, the Purple Horde Khanate was very concerned about the north and always wanted to reopen the grassland Silk Road. The important location of Belgorsal was the key hub for opening up trade routes, so they were reluctant to give up or destroy it. After all, Timur put in the greatest effort. In order to show respect, Zhejiang Khan suggested renaming Birgosalai to Timur Salai, to commemorate his remarkable military achievements. In the future, this city will be jointly operated by both parties, collecting commercial taxes and tribute from the surrounding grassland tribes. Although the eastern section of the grassland Silk Road had already been largely cut off by this time, as a regional trade center, the city of Salai still had considerable oil and water resources. Timur was very satisfied with this suggestion and agreed to their request. Afterwards, the Purple Horde began to invest energy in this area as well. Sarai means city in Persian. The first capital of the Golden Horde was Batu Sal'e, established by Batu. Later, the successor to the Great Khan, Birgo, moved the capital to the banks of the Volga River and established the new capital, Birgosalai. These places, even though they have been destroyed multiple times in history, can always be rebuilt due to their important location. In the era of Russia's rise, the city of Cheritsyn was established near Belgosalai, while Batusal became Astrakhan, indicating the significance of its geographical location. The main force of the Purple Horde was limited in number and could not stay here forever. Therefore, the Khanate hired nearby Slavs as guards. The biggest threat here is to escape the lost remnants, and the Slavs have centuries of hatred with the surrounding nomadic tribes, so they resist very hard. Timur means iron, and Sarai means city. Therefore, the local Slavs also call it Stalingrad, which means Iron City. After the retreat of the army, the Tuachuo lost party launched several attacks and were all defeated by the defending mercenaries. The city has gradually settled down and become the core of stable surroundings. After solving the problem of Tuachuo lost, the Ottoman Sultanate, which was entrenched in the region from Asia Minor to the Caucasus, became the next target. Although the land area is small, Ottoman is not a rival that can be underestimated. Because the strength of such a country is often not determined solely by its territory. The Ottoman Empire is located at the junction of two civilizations and can also be seen as a frontier region of the world of the Celestial Church. The cultural customs here are quite different from those in the hinterland. The backbone of the Ottoman forces was a group of jihadists known as Ghazi. The continuous influx of nomadic tribes, exiles, and fanatical believers from the east provided him with a continuous source of troops, allowing Sudan to deploy troops far beyond its territorial limits. This tradition has a long history in Asia Minor. In 1071, the Seljuk Turks defeated the Eastern Roman army in Manshikot, and it is generally believed that this battle opened the door for the Turkic tribes to advance westward. Of course, this statement is not accurate because the Turks are just their own names. In the eyes of the most cultured Persians in the area, these people can only be called Turkmen, which means people like Turks rather than Turks. After all, Persians have seen the true Turkic Khaganate, and this kind of fake barbarians will not be mistaken at a glance. Moreover, not all Turkmen tribes were Turkmen people from Central Asia. In fact, the first wave of invasion, looting, and occupation of Roman territory in Asia was mainly carried out by the local Armenians. The history of Armenia is very long, and their Christian churches are even older than those denominations in Europe. The territory of this country has undergone many changes in history, often forming a somewhat vague collective term, and its internal forces are also quite complex. These Armenian tribes departing from the Caucasus quickly occupied a piece of land in Asia Minor under the banner of Holy War and established the Danishmanian dynasty. So, the first group of Turks who invaded Rome may not even be Turkmen, but Armenians. After several years of local holy war and grabbing a treat, these Armenians seem to realize that their religion is not quite right. So, they finally realized and announced that they had joined the Tianfang sect. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Luozi Shoulders King. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Luozi Shoulders King. This chaotic environment provided soil for Ottoman's growth. Although the Ottoman Empire was founded with Ghazi, no one said that they could not fight holy wars with pagans, so there were many Christian soldiers in the Ottoman wars. Until now, Armenians remain one of the main sources of Ottoman troops, and even though the Purple Horde controls the Balkans, some Serbian knights still defect to the Ottomans due to dissatisfaction with the Khanate's rule. This also makes the actual available military strength of Ottoman even stronger. Before the actual outbreak of war, Timur still adopted traditional strategies and sent people to launch a public opinion attack on Ottoman, calling on everyone to launch a holy war against Ottoman. Quickly, the Purple Horde, France and other forces responded and sent troops to join the ranks of the Holy War, preparing to advance from the Caucasus, Juneburg, Chirikia and other places, making it difficult for the Ottomans to pay attention to both ends. Sultan Bayezid was very angry when he heard that Timur was coming to attack him. He immediately condemned Timur and called on everyone to wage a holy war against him in the capacity of the unity of all. Bayezid successfully hit a time difference and defeated the Purple Horde vanguard near Nicaea. While the Purple Horde was busy shrinking its forces, the Sultan quickly rushed eastward with the elite Serbian guards to reconcile with the army there and prepare to defeat Timur first. After both sides approached, the Ottomans discovered that there were actually a large number of Persians in Timur's army. The Persians have always been known for their weak and unbeatable soldiers, and filling these people into the front line indicates that Timur's strength is far inferior to his own boasting. Bayezid also fell into a blind disregard for the enemy, not choosing a battlefield that was advantageous to him, and even rushing to launch an attack without waiting for the soldiers to repair themselves. However, the Persians under Timur's command were exceptionally resilient, which prevented the Ottoman army from making a breakthrough. Instead, it was the low-ranking Turks in the Ottoman army who turned against them. The Ottoman army suffered a great defeat, and the Sultan was also captured alive by Timur. This major failure has put the Ottoman Empire on the brink of collapse. The defeat of Shahya's strongest opponent has greatly benefited the Purple Horde. The Khanate believes that it is necessary to express gratitude, show sincerity, and further enhanced the friendship between the two sides. The Purple Horde and Timur Khanate are brotherly kingdoms of different fathers and mothers. Emperor Timur Kang supported the Khaganate and made great contributions, which must be publicly announced to the world. The Khanate announced that Rome had been declining for a long time. For the sake of stability, the first Khan Direct divided the world into 4 major Ulusi, managed by 2 Khan and 2 deputy Khan respectively. However, the country still fell into chaos, with the 4 great Uluses attacking each other, and Rome has not been reunified to this day. Now, the fierce enemies have been eliminated one by one, and there is hope for the revival of Rome. Therefore, after discussing with the columnists, the Roman Khan solemnly decided to confer the title of Roman co-ruled emperor on Uncle Timur. In the future, everyone will be Romans. This time, Timur herself didn't quite understand what it meant, just felt like it sounded very powerful. Later on, it was discovered that this was actually an honorary title. The Purple Horde had a unique understanding of Rome, believing it to be an identity. In theory, the whole world could be Romans. Even Mr. Huang, the grandfather of Guo Kang, who has read extensively about Central Plains poetry, supports this viewpoint. Mr. Huang's idea is that Rome is the Great Qin. Similar to the Central Plains. Anything similar to the Central Plains can be called Rome. This viewpoint was highly praised by the feudal lords of the Han dynasty and became an official prominent scholar. So, in the eyes of Zhejiang, announcing that the other party is also Rome is a very advanced way of praise and persuasion. As for the co-emperor of Rome, it is actually a term used to refer to rulers of other Roman countries. Scholars with a background in the Central Plains are not very receptive to the situation where one country has 2 emperors, so they regard it as some kind of honorary title. In the words of the play, it is Luo character shoulder-to-shoulder king, used to reward people who have made extremely great contributions. For example, after receiving this honor, the Timur Khanate can be called the Roman Khanate of the river, and Timur himself is the Roman Khanate of the river. Similarly, another traditional ally of the Khanate, France, was also very interested in the Roman title. Shortly after this incident, the King of France also spent a huge sum of money and donated the title of Emperor of France and Rome. In principle, these are all similar and belong to the category of co-ruling emperors. Just because everyone's original titles are different, there are some differences in their names. However, because they all have the character Luo in their names, the nature is still the same. After reiterating the alliance relationship, everyone turned to the Mamluk dynasty for their next goal. The coalition forces were at war with the main forces of Syria and Mamluk, and at a critical moment, a rebellion against Sudan was launched by the Caucasus Mamluk in Egypt's homeland. The rebels have promised that as long as they support them as the new sultan, they will recognize Timur as the hegemon and agree to the demands of the Purple Horde for the port. In the future, everyone will maintain peace and not invade each other. Within the Purple Horde, there was already contact with them and an army was dispatched from Cyprus to Alexandria for reinforcement. Upon learning that there was a fire in the backyard, the main force of Mamluk's army was in great turmoil. The Sultan was eager to withdraw, but was defeated halfway by Timur. After the victory of the war, various countries began to divide up the territory spit out by the Mamluk dynasty, and the Purple Horde was divided into the city of Antioch in northern Syria. After being forced to abandon Syria, Heraclius suffered at the border and said, "Beautiful Syria, farewell forever." And this time, it was the first time the Romans had recaptured this place after the Arab conquest. The Khanate was very satisfied with this and held quite grand ceremonies in both the capital and Antioch, rewarding the army and the people. At the grand racecourse in Constantinople, the Khanate held a 100-day Natum and hired a large group of Mongolian wrestlers from the grasslands to perform wrestling with the Greeks all day long. Citizens watch various fighting competitions in the arena during the day, and even if they drink too much at night, they can engage in unrestricted fighting with the timid Shui who is trying to maintain order. After a few months, everyone felt very satisfied and felt like they had returned to the great era of Rome. In Antioch, the Khanate also held a ceremony to pay tribute to the previous Khanates since Heraclius. Throughout the city, there are sacred images of various religious figures such as the former Khan, the Heavenly Father Aroha Heavenly Sovereign, and the Heavenly Brother Mao everywhere, which are very grand. In the port and city, grand water and land dojo sites were also held, with such a large scale that the Eastern Orthodox priests sent by the then Grand Patriarch Yin Daochang were not enough, and they could only bring a bunch of lamas and monks to help. It was lively for a while, and everyone was very happy. In order to establish a good relationship, even the Arab lords who were specially invited by the Khan's court drank grape juice for more than half a month, each with a red glow on their faces, and were very satisfied. This victory finally opened the sea passage for the Khanate to the Indian Ocean. After that, negotiations with countries such as Javanese Yuan and attempting direct trade laid a practical foundation. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. No Goddess in the Goddess of Mercy Temple. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. No Goddess in the Goddess of Mercy Temple. The trade between the Purple Horde and the Javanese Yuan lasted for more than 20 years, but there was not much direct contact. Now, with the increase in demand, both sides have begun to formally establish diplomacy. In 1405, Uncle Timur and Roman Khan Basil Jericho passed away, and the departure of the two lords gave the defeated country a rare opportunity. Especially, the rule of the Timur Khanate was not strong. After the death of the old emperor, his descendants, like an ordinary Khanate, began to engage in constant infighting for inheritance rights. Finally, the fourth son Shaharu gained power. However, Shaharu is more like a literary Persian king than an ambitious and typical grassland conqueror like his father. He limited his rule to Central Asia and the eastern part of Persia, focusing on stabilizing national order, developing production, and rewarding culture. He was not very focused on conquering the east and the west. Even the title was changed from Khan to the Persian Shah. Shaharu was not particularly interested in the western part of Persia, the Caucasus, and the Mediterranean coast. In these places, the forces that were once defeated by Timur have expanded again. Compared to Timur, Persians prefer Shaharu as a more noble and enlightened ruler. But for the Purple Horde, the current troubles are big. Both the Ottomans and the Mamluks, although temporarily declining, are not fuel-efficient lamps. Shaharu ran away and threw the immense pressure onto the Purple Horde. On the Egyptian side, although promising to open ports to the Khanate, the new Mamluk regime still hopes to make as much profit as possible. As military pressure decreased, the Mamluks began to attempt to restore control over trade routes and seaports. Relying solely on the Purple Tent Expeditionary Force to preserve northern Syria is already the limit, therefore, the Khanate urgently needs new allies to support itself. Although Java is far away, it is also a maritime power. Moreover, both parties have similar requirements for commercial routes. Therefore, cooperation also has a foundation. Sun Shirwan was a very influential figure in the Purple Horde Khanate. He came this time, and everyone was very attentive to his hospitality, in order to form practical cooperation as soon as possible and reopen business routes. Upon the invitation of Tua Huan, Sun 100000 soon arrived at the temple of Empress Sophia. However, Wang Dalai Lama pointed out that it is not appropriate to ask him too directly to negotiate terms. He suggested arranging visits and banquets first, and then following the traditions of the Central Plains, discussing while eating. Everyone has no objections to this. Tuohuan asked Guo Kang to help receive him, so that there would be time to arrange follow-up activities here. Wang Dalai Lama sent Wuhan to help Guo Kang, saying that if there are more professional questions, he can answer them. Guo Kang is a little guilty about this. From Wuhan's famous saying, "The church grasps sheep," he may have understood some, but not so much. However, all the clergy here are under the management of the great Lama Wang. Guo Kang, who was recommended by him, cannot say much and can only follow him to welcome them. On the way, Guo Kang couldn't resist and took the initiative to ask, "What position are you holding here, following Master Wang. I have been sent to further my studies, Wu Han replied solemnly with a stern face. Master Wang said that after completing these studies, he will recommend me to go to the border region and serve as a local priest. As the Patriarch, Guo Kang felt that Wang Dalai Lama had positioned himself as a benchmark for Eastern Orthodox experts. He lived a leisurely life in Dadu because, according to Eastern Roman tradition, the Grand Patriarch was not originally a theological expert. The organization in the church is quite mature, with specialized institutions that gather a large group of theologians responsible for theological issues, such as explaining scriptures to believers or debating scriptures with Roman bishops. Under this structure, the great patriarch himself did not understand theology, and there was actually no problem. The eunuchs and great patriarchs of the Eastern Roman Empire did not even recognize characters, while the great Lama at least knew some characters and could perform magic, which was already very impressive. However, grassroots organizations often do not have this condition, and it is best for local leaders to be more versatile. The religious situation in the territory of the Roman Khanate is very complex, and it is unclear whether Wu Han's level is sufficient or not. How have you gained during your time studying? Guo Kang felt embarrassed to directly question and began to inquire. I have gained a lot. Master Wang taught me many tricks, and now I can take pictures of my heavenly father and heavenly brother on the wall, said Wu Han proudly. Guo Kang was speechless for a moment. Is there anything more practical? Of course there is. Wu Han nodded. The two of them happened to pass through a large door, and Wu Han led him out. On the platform outside, there were several training haystacks and many weapons piled up. I don't know why Wang Dalai Lama was doing this. Just as he was thinking about it, Wu Han picked up a chain hammer and waved it towards the nearby armor rack. The shelf snapped off with a loud bang, and the armor fell all over the ground. Wu Han picked up one of them and saw that the iron armor had already been deformed. The master said, when preaching, "This is enough," he said seriously. That's enough for me too, Guo Kang nodded abruptly. The two continued walking towards the hall. When he arrived at the door, he heard a loud voice and asked loudly, "Why don't you Nyang Nyang temple have Nyang Nyang worship?" End of this chapter.